Greetings to this second session of Greek 272, Greek 2, class number 2, and this is segment number C, the second recorded video of the professors. Is mine. The first segment, segment A, was by Dr. Campbell. The second segment has not yet been posted at the time I am recording this because I've been waiting for it to download from the different laptop. As I've shared with you already, I had some difficulties, and I hope to have those resolved in the next half hour or so, or at the latest by 8 o'clock this evening. I apologize for the lateness of everything this week, but it is just what it is. I'm going to go ahead, though, and record this session and finish our discussion of the weak aorist tense in chapter 12, section 2. We began that section in our recorded session yesterday that you haven't yet seen. And before I begin, I just want to, sorry, I didn't mean to shut the video off. I want to share a different camera. This one that's pointed at my whiteboard in my office. And I may have shared this verse before, I'm not sure. It's from Isaiah chapter 9, verse 7. Let's see. Yes, I'm okay. I was wondering why. Okay. Something went wrong, but we're back now. Isaiah 7, verse 9 and 5 shared this verse with you before. I apologize. The last part of the verse in Hebrew is Ilo ta'amino, Kilo ta'amenu. It's a play on words that the prophet Isaiah loves to do, and is translated in what we call the Septuagint. If you look down here at the lower right corner below the verse in Greek, you'll notice the three letters LXX. And this is a translation of the Hebrew text. The Hebrew text above was written by the prophet in the about 700 BC. But it was not translated into Greek by Jewish scholars until much later, at least what we know. There may be translations that we have no knowledge of, but this one that the early church used in sharing the gospel around the world during the first 2 or 3 centuries in the Greek language, because that was the common language of the Roman Empire when the apostles first went out. And it probably goes back, but it goes back before the time of Christ. It was translated into Greek. The Old Testament was translated into Greek the first 2 centuries before Christ. And therefore, it was naturally the translation that the apostles would have come back to in order to share the word of God with people, particularly Gentiles, who did not know Hebrew, nor did they care to learn Hebrew. And it seems that most likely Jesus taught his disciples also many words in Greek. He may have even given them passages like the Beatitudes, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the meek, and so on, in Makarios, in Greek itself. Certainly we would expect that Jesus would have spoken Greek, since it was the lingua franca, the main language of the time of the Roman Empire. The Roman soldiers who went through Judea would have spoken Latin to each other, but that would be only the language of government and soldiers. It would otherwise be the language, they would have spoken Greek. the Greek of our period, the Koine Greek that we are learning. And what the prophet says is, in this play of words, if you do not take firm hold, you will not be firmly held. He goes from an active voice, if you do not take firm hold, ta'aminu, to a passive voice, ta'amenu, you will not be firmly held. And the translators of the Septuagint made an interesting translation here, and that's why I wanted to point this out. Unless you believe, unless you entrust yourself to imply to God and to His Word, pistus ete, which is an aorist. It is a subjunctive form that we won't meet until chapter 16, but it is an aorist tense. You notice the sigma added to the pistu, to the verb that we know, the verb stem, pistuo. And we have the weak aorist sigma, pistus ete. It's just the ending that is strange to us at this point. Ude me sunete. You will not understand. You will not grasp it. You will not perceive it. Now, that's an interesting version. And we don't know if the translators of the Septuagint had a different Hebrew text, slightly different in front of them, or if they were actually doing what we call nowadays a paraphrase. It is possible that they understood these Hebrew words in this way, not as we naturally understand them. You will not be firmly held, but as the sense of you will not grasp, you will not understand. Believing and understanding, believing and perceiving, believing and grasping are connected together, especially in the Old Testament wisdom books, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So I thought it just interesting to show you these forms. Both of them are actually, well, this one is aorist tense. Actually, this is present tense, and that is even more interesting because he's saying if you do not entrust yourself in an action that's probably seen here as a more of a commitment kind of action in the aorist tense, you will not experience the light. And he's talking more about the repercussions of believing than he is the actual fact of believing. In other words, the repercussions are that we might be able to see and understand. That is my prayer for us all in these lessons together, that as we understand more and more the forms and the words of the New Testament, that even more so we will grasp the insights, the wisdom of what we are reading, and the application of it through the Holy Spirit to our lives. Now I'm going to go to our textbook, and we'll continue our lesson and share the screen of the textbook. Let's see, looking for it, and it's not showing up on my, by the way, if you don't have this, I highly recommend it. eSword. Do you have eSword? This is free and especially useful on a laptop. If you happen to be using a laptop, I hope that you use eSword. One of the advantages of this program is that you can very quickly move from one passage of scripture, Psalm 19, verse 1, to Obadiah chapter 1, to the New Testament. I go down to Colossians chapter 3, And I can scroll down to the verses in chapter 3. This is the King James Version, but I have access to the English Standard Version, which is the one I use the most, and several others. You have to download them. If you read the instructions, you will find out why. Notice how many commentaries. They're older commentaries. These are in the public domain, but notice how many commentaries are available to me for free. And these dictionary, including that of Dr. Mounts, which is a very modern one. I do not recommend the dictionary by Thayer. It was not done, or let's say it was done shortly before we made many, many discoveries in the late 19th century, rendering the Thayer's Greek lexicon actually obsolete before it hardly got off the press. So I don't recommend that. I do recommend Mounts very much, and I'm not seeing anything yet under there, but probably I need to restart my computer because I just re-downloaded this. But that's not what I wanted to share with you. So I just saw it there. So let me share the screen. Let's get going on our what we are doing today, and that is, well, let's see, that's not, I'm back again. I want to share the textbook, which is what we should be looking at. There we are. Don't know why it took so long to get there. And annotate. For some reason, my textbook is showing it black. And that's not what I want. Maybe I can correct this. Let me see. We'll do this a different way. If it's not going to cooperate, I do have a camera that I can use. That should do the trick for us. And I seem to be making all kinds of mistakes. Let's go this way. All right. I'm going to move this camera, which is right beside me. And sorry for the shaking. Let's open our textbook, if you would please, to chapter 12. And to chapter 12 on page 111. Verbs with stems that end in a consonant. That's the section. It's not as visible to you as I might like in this camera view, but I'm sure you can see it on your computer, on your video. The fact that we add a sigma in order to make the aorist tense has certain repercussions with certain verbs. With luo, it was simple. We added the augment, and we added for the stem, aorist stem, we added sigma to the present stem and became loose. And the ending, a, as, in, amin, ate, an. But when we add sigma to the endings, to the present stem of certain verbs, then some which are classified here as gutturals here, and some which are called labials, and some which are called dentals. You don't have to learn these three words because I won't be using them. I'm not so familiar with these. What is important is the consonant combination. In other words, what happens when we add sigma to verbs whose stem ends in, for example, gamma, kappa, or chi? Or what happens when we add the aorist sigma to the present stem of verbs that end in beta, p, or phi? Or what happens when we add the aorist sigma to the stem, present stem, to get the aorist stem of verbs that whose stem ends, present stem ends in delta, tau, or theta, as in patho, I persuade. What happens when we add sigma? And here we see the results. The result of adding sigma to any three of these, gamma, kappa, or chi, is that we get the consonant xi. The result of adding sigma to a stem, a verb stem that ends in one of these three is that we get the consonant psi. In other words, no surprise, add sigma to p and you're going to get psi. Instead of writing it p sigma, we write the letter psi. And here, sigma added to any of these three actually just ends in sigma. Sigma is actually a very strong consonant when it comes to adding it to verb forms. And we get some verb stems that look different. So you probably already read this page, and you'll see here some common verbs that are ending in some of these consonants: blepo, grapho, pempo, doxazo, sozo. Notice that iota subscript with sozo, I say, patho, I persuade. Now, in the indicative, if we add the augment and the sigma, we translate the aorist with the English past tense. I see, blepo, I saw, eblepsa. Notice that instead of p sigma, we would expect, we have simply psi, the Greek letter psi, eblepsa. Augment and accent, in this case, eblepsa, egrapsa. We add sigma to phi and we get psi, egrapsa in the aorist. I write, grapho. I wrote. Indicative, aorist tense, egrapsa. I send, pempo. I sent. Augment, stem, pemps. Ending, I sent. I send, present tense. The English past tense is translated from the Greek aorist tense, pempsa. And so these verbs that end in these particular consonants form a different aorist. In the weak aorist, we call it, or the first aorist, whichever term you use, in a different, slightly different way than we expect. Now notice in chapter 12.2.3, verbs with stems that end in contract verbs, essentially. We talked about those briefly yesterday. And if we turn the page, we see that those simply lengthen their contract vowel. So iteo, that we learned in chapter 6, I ask, iteo. In the aorist is a weak aorist. There is no strong aorist. If you have a weak aorist, you do not have a strong aorist. And what happens is, in this case, the augment lengthens the alpha iota to an eta with iota subscripts. And the eta, the epsilon here, iteo, becomes a sa. See the augment, how it is lengthened the alpha iota to an eta with the iota subscript. The iota goes under the eta. And then the epsilon is lengthened to eta, sa. I asked. Iteo, or I told, in the New Testament, I told, because the contraction drops the epsilon. I ask, or I am asking, present tense, I told. I ask. etesa. Agapao or agapo, because you'll never see agapao in the New Testament. You'll only see this in the dictionary. To show us that it is an alpha omega verb, why it contracts the way it does. But in the New Testament, we will see I am loving or I love, agapo. I loved, past tense in the English would be agapesa. Notice that the alpha has lengthened to eta with the augment. Augment lengthens these initial vowels. And the alpha here, the alpha omega lengthens to eta when the sigma is added. Agapesa. Genao. Now this is a verb that is very often confused with genomai, especially in the aorist tense. So watch out for this one. The clue is that it has two news instead of one. If you have two news, it is genao. I beget with, this is the English present tense, I beget or I produce. I begat is the English past tense, and to get that in Greek, we use the aorist indicative, egenesa, with two news, egenesa. Notice here, the alpha, genao, has lengthened here to eta, and because this verb starts with a gamma, we just add the augment, genesa. Now, we do watch out for exceptions, and there is one listed here that's very important, the verb kaleo. Well, we would probably expect kalesa, because these all lengthen their contract vowel. Aiteo becomes etesa. Agapao becomes agapesa. But there's always an exception to every rule. And the verb kaleo is not ekalesa, but it is ekalesa with epsilon. So note this exception. The verb kaleo, which is very common, we must learn it in the New Testament, does not lengthen its contract vowel when it forms the aorist tense. I think something happened to that webcam when I changed, when I moved the book. I'm not sure what. So essentially, you need to pay attention to those pages in your textbook and just read them. I think they're self-explanatory. There's one other thing I would like for you to look at. In just a moment, I need to change the pages on it. You have what we termed actually a personal notebook that was given to you at the beginning. And I'm not sure that you have these pages. If not, I will post them. But I'd like for you to look at these pages. They're actually part of the, right now, I'm not going to ask you to fill out the pages. Let's see. These are actually part of the appendices in our personal notebook. What I ask the students to do, particularly when they get into Greek 3 and 4, is to create their own personal notebook. And with this personal notebook, you'll have all the major forms of the Greek grammar. And when you have those, you'll be able to see, I'm not getting what I want yet. but I'll have it soon. There we are. Now I'm getting what I want. Okay. I'm going to share it with you. Back to right now, I'm not seeing my camera. You're seeing me, I hope, but let me share that screen with you now. And if we get there where I want to go on that screen, here it is. Get my spotlight. In this personal notebook, and I will post these pages because I'm not sure that you have them yet. This is actually, if I'm going up, page 39 in your personal notebook. Once this notebook is finished and you have filled in all the forms that you have learned in the 4 semesters, your personal notebook, I think, will become a reference volume for you, where you don't have to look up in the textbook the forms, or what is this present subjunctive of, what is the present infinitive of this or that verb form, or what is the genitive form of this noun. You will be able to find it quickly because it will be on one of these pages. The main grammatical forms will be on one of these pages in your personal notebook. Now, this is part of the appendices, and so you won't have to fill out anything here. But if you notice, I have given you here the verb form in the, as it is in the lexicon, luo, the first example. We haven't yet had the infinitive, we haven't had the subjunctive, but we have had the aorist indicative active elusa. We haven't had the aorist infinitive yet, but we will soon. I just noticed right now these 2 columns, the verb that we know, luo, agapao, and the aorist indicative form that we know. Now, and notice that we do not tell you, oh, this is a weak aorist and this is a strong aorist here, second aorist form. By the time you get to learning this table, well, that will be second nature to you. Whether a verb has a first aorist or a second aorist form does not change the meaning, basic meaning of the aorist. The first aorist, or the weak aorist, and the strong aorist are the terms that we use to classify this tense, but they do not affect its meaning. So, for example, if you have a weak aorist, you do not have a strong aorist, and vice versa. So, luo has a weak aorist, elusa. It does not have a strong aorist. The first verb that we meet here with the strong aorist is the verb ago. And the aorist indicative active is agagon. Notice that we have added a gamma that we didn't have in the present tense, in the lexicon form of the present tense. Ago, I need, I bring, I go. I led, I brought, I went. Agagon, or they went, they led. It could be either one, because this ending could also be third person plural. Agagon. I lead, I led, I brought, I went. Agagon. Ago, I go, I lead, I bring. And with the augment in the indicative mode, we go into the past tense with the aorist agagon. Notice here we have a contract verb, aiteo. This list after luo, this list is alphabetical. Aiteo in the aorist indicative is, as we've already seen, etesa. Stigma added to the stem, and the augment has lengthened the alpha and iota I. The diphthong here has become A with iota subscript. That's a different kind of augment that we need to get used to. That happens when you have a diphthong and add the epsilon. It lengthens to eta with iota subscript. Eta. Notice this epsilon has lengthened to also to an eta. So this is actually, it looks different, but this is actually right according to the rules. No exceptions here. There are exceptions, but not here. Etesa. Akoluteo. What happens to akoluteo in the aorist tense? What happens is this initial vowel, alpha, lengthens to eta. When you add the epsilon, lengthens to eta. Akolutesa. This epsilon has become lengthened to eta when the sigma is added, and then comes the aorist endings a, as, in, amen, ate, an. What happens when we have the present tense of akuo and we make it into the aorist tense in the indicative ekusa? Sigma added to make the aorist stem, alpha, I heard, I hear, I heard. Anoigo, I open. What happens when you make the aorist stem? You add sigma to gamma, and that becomes C. But notice that here we have three different possibilities, because Greek will always, and any language will always remain with exceptions. And so the aorist indicative active will be ano, ane oxa, or a ne oxa, or a noixa. Those three forms, any of these three might be used by a New Testament author for the aorist indicative active of this verb, anoigo. So we're back, and I hope we didn't lose too much. If something was lost, I think you have gotten the essential part. I provided, in other words, for you in the appendices of your personal notebook pages, the present stem and the aorist indicative, not just the present stem, but the present form of verbs like luo and ago and so on, and the aorist indicative active form in that fourth column. So with those appendices, you actually have a good summary of some of the major verb forms in the New Testament. And once you have completed that personal notebook and printed out all the pages, actually, normally I would provide you with those pages, but right now I'm going to wait to hopefully that we will be able to get back to campus in the next few weeks to provide those for you. So I'm not assigning that as homework right now, but I just want you to see. You will find a similar table, by the way, also in the back of your textbook. So make sure that you understand what happens with the weak aorist. We have the strong aorist, we learned that last week, but what happens when we add sigma to the stem of certain verbs, not just luo, the regular ones, but certain verbs when we add sigma to make the aorist stem, what happens? Make sure you know when you do exercise 12.2, I think you will become very familiar with how to form the weak aorist indicative.